should be having Ricky Steamboat here at some point, and we also have Brian Alvarez here, and we're going through a bunch of emails here. Let me see what – there's actually a couple of questions here I wanted to get to. We also got some phone calls that we're going to get to in just a second. This is from Muhammad, who says, for how long do you think the Bret Hart-Kevin Nash partnership will last? I thought they hated each other because of Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. They don't hate each other. Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart actually do hate each other, but it's business. And if they wanted Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart to be a tag team, possible. Let's see. This is recently another online wrestling show, WCW Live, has been making various excuses for the WWF and WCW ratings. Everyone on the show has agreed ratings are not accurate. That explains why the WWF ratings have not shot through the roof during their unopposed hour, and why WCW's ratings have not been up more. How accurate are the ratings, or are these guys just making excuses? There's some truth to it. I do not want to criticize them unless I hear the tape of exactly what they said, but the ratings, there's no such thing as 100% accurate or anything like that, but they're as close to accurate as we've got, and if they are as accurate this week as they were 6 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, 20 weeks ago, and 100 weeks ago. So for comparison purposes, they are accurate.
Actually, hasn't it been that every time a company has low ratings, they say that they're screwed up?
Yes, I remember when the WWF was losing in the ratings, I used to hear that all the time about how ratings are not accurate, and in fact, the only accurate measure is how many tickets you sell to the matches, because at the time the WWF was doing pretty well selling tickets to the matches. And, they were, you remember all those things about how Ted Turner, bought the ratings and silly things like that? Yeah.
Well, if they're screwed up now, they've been screwed up since WCW was killing Raw.
Yeah, I think that they're not perfect, and I think they're pretty damn accurate. So anyway, Alex Melly says on an MTV special a couple of years back, there was an American wrestler in Japan who claimed to be a shoot fighter or something and was supposed to be really great. What's the deal? Do you remember that, Brian? That was Bart Vale. And we got Ricky Steamboat on the line, so we'll get to him in just a second. But let me quickly answer that question. That was Bart Vale, who did pro wrestling matches in Japan for. I know he worked for Fujiwara Gumi. I think he worked for the old UWF. He actually also did K1 fights, and he did Extreme Fighting, so he did real matches with them as well, shoot matches. But he was on claiming to be the world shoot fight champion, and which was actually a pro wrestling championship that he got. He didn't win it in Japan. What happened was he was promoting Fujiwara shows in Miami. And he was promoting himself. Basically, he wrestled Fujiwara in Miami and beat Fujiwara in a pro wrestling match and for what was called the World Shoot Fight Championship. And that's where that title got started. And, he made a lot of claims. And unfortunately, when he went into Extreme Fighting, he fought actually Kazunari Murakami, who's the guy who we just talked about earlier in the show in that match at the Tokyo Dome on the 4th. And Kazunari Murakami knocked him out. It was actually a pretty intense match. And Bart Vale hasn't really been talked about much in the world of shoot fighting, although I actually heard that he did an interview for a book where he said some really crazy things in the interview, about Ken Shamrock and claiming that he did a match which actually he got a lot of fame. There was an article on Bart Vale once in Sports Illustrated as well, where he talked about but he has always claimed his big claim to fame as a shoot fighter was in a match in Miami, he knocked out Ken Shamrock, which was, in fact, in a professional wrestling match. And I think that there were a lot of people who were kind of seething because it was no big deal until Ken Shamrock became a big superstar in UFC, at which point Bart Vale started promoting himself as the guy who knocked out Ken Shamrock. And I remember reading in a Black Belt magazine article, they had the top 10 shoot fighters in the world, and they had Bart Vale's name in there. And one of the reasons was, or actually the main reason was, well, of course, he knocked out Ken Shamrock. So anyway,
the moral of the story is if you make your own belt, you can be any damn thing you want.
I guess so. Let's go. We've been waiting for this one for a long, long time. We've got Ricky Steamboat on the line. Ricky, how you doing today?
Good. Is this Dave?
This is Dave.
Dave.
How are you?
When was the last time you and I talked? I guess at Cincinnati at the Pillman Memorial.
Right, at the Brian Pillman Show. How have you been?
Right. Good. Been good and busy.
Yeah, how's so what have you been up to? Just you're running the gym and what else?
Got a health club up here in Cornelius, a little bit north of Charlotte. Been doing that for about 4 years now. And this past year, my son has been getting involved in car racing.
Yeah, you had mentioned that to me when we talked before. So what is it like go-kart racing or?
No, well, not really. I would say it's a level or two above that, and I don't know if you've ever heard of these legend cars that race. We race the same night as they do. Richie's car, they'll run up to about 80 miles an hour, and it's a good start for the young kids. And his next level will be legend cars, and then it'll be a full-size car because he really wants to pursue this racing.
So he's really into the racing thing.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun for Dad too. Yeah.
Now did you get him involved? Because I remember wasn't there a period where you were working on like pit crews and things like that?
Not working on it at a regular basis, but I did do a pit crew one Charlotte Coca-Cola 600 with Rusty Wallace's team in Charlotte. I think it was about 1990, and that was a race he won, Coca-Cola 600, and I did do a celebrity late model race on a dirt track, and I won that one. That was kind of neat. So I'm an old hot rod nut from the 70s, and when I was in school, I used to do some drag racing at the drag strip. So this thing here with working on Richie's car and watching him race and all that kind of stuff is really neat. I enjoy it, and he loves it too.
What have you been watching? Do you watch wrestling a lot now, or a little, or how close do you keep up with things?
Well, I probably watch it a total of maybe an hour a month.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe an hour a month. Yeah, not a whole lot. Not a whole lot.
So you're semi caught up with. I mean, it's a totally different world than the world you left 4 or 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about the way everything's changed and just everything that's happened in wrestling, I guess?
Well, David, we gotta, things gotta move on, and new generation, new way of doing things. I understand all of this, although in some of the ways that they're doing it, I don't quite agree with it. Maybe it's because I came along from like the old school or something like that, when the old timers were breaking myself in, breaking Savage in, breaking Flair in. We were sort of taught from that school. Mid-'80s, Vince McMahon took wrestling to another level. And here we are at the end of this century, and I think it's taken to another level. And, I get a lot of comments from fans that used to watch it yesteryear, but, they kind of liked it then. But then when you talk to the new generation of fans that are watching it now, they like what they're watching. And, of course, they don't have any way to compare it because they didn't watch it yesteryear. They didn't watch wrestling in the 70s and 80s and stuff like that. So, I'm in a position to where I can look back and I can see where wrestling was. I can see where it is today. And the way I would call it is that I understand that we have to take it to another level, And although, once again, I don't agree with some of the things they're doing, and maybe it's because, I was brought up with a little bit of the old school in me. When Savage and Flair and Hogan, when we started coming along in the mid-'80s and WrestleManias and all that kind of stuff, we brought wrestling to another level. And at that time, always keeping in mind, too, a little bit more closer to the family and the kids could watch it and stuff like that. But, you got to understand with the way everything else is going in television. I mean, you look at soap operas 20 years ago and what they're doing today. Shoot. What they're doing today you couldn't have done 20 years ago. And so it's just an evolution, Hey, come on, we got to move on. Okay? Are we there?
Okay, we had our daily interruption right there, and we're back with Ricky Steamboat and Brian Alvarez. And Rick, the guy we have on the phone is Brian Alvarez from he does Figure 4 Weekly, and I just want to introduce you to since he's on the line as well.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Brian. How you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. I can barely hear you on this end.
Okay, Brian, you speak up. Brian, how did you've seen most of the Steamboat Flair stuff, haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was actually, right before the show started, I got back some of the old issues of the Observer, and, back in '89, and I mean, one of the things that I just jogged into my memory was in 1989, Rick Steamboat and Ric Flair they had a lot of matches all over the country, but 3 national matches, so to speak, 2 pay-per-views and 1 national special, which went 55, 56 minutes. And they finished 1, 2, and 3 for match of the year that year, and nobody has ever approached. There's never been a 1-2 or anything like that. It was just like when I look back on it and looked at the comments that a lot of people were writing, and it was just wow. It was like looking back, it's like there were people. I mean, a lot of people in this. We did a best of the '80s book,
yeah.
And a lot of people were talking about your match in New Orleans, Nashville, Chicago is like the greatest match that they had ever seen. That's what people were saying in '89 when you did those matches. It was looking back and even over the last week or two since the decade started, we've had a lot of guests and people have asked about like the greatest matches of all time, and those matches invariably come up.
Well, even like a lot of matches 10 years ago, when you look back on them now, they don't seem as good as they were then. But those matches, you look back, and they're still awesome.
Rick, you there?
Yes, yeah. I'm just listening to you guys. Yeah.
Okay.
I get a lot of comments about that too. Whether and it's most of the time it's with the fans that have been following wrestling for the last 10 or 15 years, and the question asked to me is that who was the greatest match? Who did I wrestle that had the greatest match? And well, it's almost a flip of a coin, because if you got to look at it in several different ways. A lot of people talk about the match I had with Savage at WrestleMania 3 at the Silverdome. Okay. And then they asked me about the Flair matches that I had, the 3 matches in 1989. Well, my answer to that, and in today's world when I'm talking to the wrestling fans, my answer to that is this. Savage is the kind of guy that, he likes to make sure that every single move, every single point, every single reason in the match, the storyline, the psychology is pretty much taken apart, dissected. If it works, we'll keep it, and then we're going to use it, and thought out, okay, planned out. And then, of course, matches with Rick and I, we'd look at each other in the locker room, and he says, okay, I'll just see you in the ring. So I don't know. When I talk to the guys, the boys, and they ask me that question, I say, well, look, if you want to look at it from a professional point of view, which is within our niche or our circle, I would have to say the matches I had with Flair, because we would just go out there and just wing it and listen to crowd response and psychology, and if something came up in the course of the match and we got a good response from it, with the fans, and then okay, we got a little fork in the road here, and we're going to take a right, and it changes. And but with the Savage, with me working with Randy, it was, we're going to do this step 1 through step 157, and whether we get responses or whether if it works, we just keep right on going through the numbers. So mostly when I talk to the guys and they ask me about that, guys that have in the business now but were watching us work then, that they weren't in the business, but that's my answer. I said, you got one that's everything's pretty well laid out, and then you got one with just a couple of 2 old pros in there that we're just going to go in there and wing it. So really, I think the hardest of the 2 decisions would be to go out there and have a match and just use your instinct and use your ears and your psychology and stuff like that you've learned, and do a match like that and carry it for 55 or 56 minutes like the one we had in New Orleans.
Someone once told me that as far as like the WrestleMania 3 match with Savage, you were talking about like step 1 through 157.
Yeah.
And I heard that you guys had every single spot numbered, and that on the plane you could sit there and go, Randy, spot 42, and he'd go, arm drag. And you had the entire match worked out and memorized to that, I guess to that, is that exactly how it occurred, or?
Well, that's a pretty close description, although we wouldn't do it on the plane because we try to kayfabe it, okay?
Yeah.
So, while we're on the road, maybe in the locker room or he would come to my room or I would go to his, we would have this thing scripted out. And so we got to the point to where I would turn page in my notebook. I'd turn page after page after page. Finally, about the fourth page, I said, okay, this is step number 112. I'm going to do this, this, and this. Tell me the rest of the match. And he would go through and tell me the rest of the match. And then he would get his book out, and he would flip through some pages, and he would say, okay, I'm on step number 86, and I'm going to be doing this, this, and this. Tell me the rest of the match. So this is, that's the way it was done.
So how long before WrestleMania did you plan the whole thing out?
Probably, a good month.
Wow.
We would take bits and pieces of ideas that we came up with and try it in the house show that we were working that night. Okay? And if we got a pop from it, if we got a response from it, I said, okay, we're going to use that in the pay-per-view. Where we're going to put it, we'll decide. But we got a good response from it tonight, and we're going to use it. So we would come up with different ideas and different little scenarios and different high spots and try them. But we never, not once, would take the match from A to Z and while we're on the road and test it. We never did that. I think, a little bit of pride and ego was we've come up with good stuff here, and we're going to put it together, and we're going to just do it on the pay-per-view, So,
yeah. What I thought was cool about that was because in the match there was like this one spot where the referee dropped down, and as he was getting down on all fours, his hand hit the mat once, and then he did a 2 count, but the crowd popped like they thought it was the pinfall.
Right.
And you guys knew that it wasn't, and you didn't even miss a beat.
Right. Well, the ref was in on that. So many times, our goal is to paint a picture to where the fans think that they're going to be calling the fall, and then we sucker them,
So that was the plan spot?
And with today's workers, I don't know how in depth they get into even thinking about little stuff like that,
Yeah.
But it just, even people at home, and that was the whole the importance of it, was the fact that Randy and I were saying, God, this is going to be at the Silverdome. This is pay-per-view WrestleMania number 3. This is, and then when we heard reports that the dome was sold out, there's going to be 90,000 people there, and so, with the interest and everything being around Hogan and Andre, and deservingly so, being around those two guys, we said, Savage and I were looking at each other, well, let's take advantage of the situation. If the Silverdome has got 90-some thousand, you can just imagine what the buy rate and then the pay-per-view numbers are going to be. I mean, Hogan and Andre, okay, they drew the show and everything else. They drew the house. They drew the pay-per-view. But let's steal that son of a gun. And we tried our best to do that.
And I just want to really quick read this email. It's from Professor Larry DeGarris, who actually wrestles as Professor Larry Briscoe. He's a professor of sports management, assistant professor of sports management at Washington State University, who knew Damien Demento. And he said Damien Demento's real name is Phil Thies. He was trained by Johnny Rods in Brooklyn and worked as Mondo Clean for several years, which we have talked about. He left the WWF to have surgery. When he returned, he wanted to do a new gimmick called 3D, a comic book character come to life. Vince was willing to take him back as Damien Demento, but he didn't want to do it. So he did a Bruce Willis movie, Die Hard 2. He still works some Northeast independent shows as one of the Bums, a bushwhacker-type version of two homeless guys. And so anyway, that's the story on Damien Demento. Somebody had somehow that name came up in the first hour.
I wonder where Briscoe worked. That's around my area.
Yeah, he's a professor at the college, and he still wrestles too. There was a story in the I think it was in the Seattle paper. I saw a story about him, and like this professor with a background as a professional wrestler.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
David, I like your comment there with Demento working like the bushwhackers with the two homeless guys.
That's what the guy said.
That was quick. That was good.
Okay, we've got Andy in Los Angeles here. Andy, what's happening?
Hey, good afternoon, guys. Pleasure to talk to you, Ricky. Dave, just one thing before my questions for Ricky. Did you see The Rock on Fox News this weekend?
I did not, no.
He was on with Judith Regan again because she's the publisher of his book, and he was really out of character and very, very subdued. Nothing controversial came of it, but he appears to be doing all of his media rounds as himself rather than as the Rock character, which, after seeing him on MTV when he hosted it along with Mick, and he was in character where he came off as just an arrogant prick, I was actually kind of glad that he stayed out of character this one time. So that's that. Ricky, a bunch of questions for you, if I can get to them all. I heard a rumor that you said you thought you had one good match left in you and you wanted it to be with Flair. Is that true?
Yeah, there could be some truth about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've been asked, and I mean, I've been asked mostly by fans, but not by promoters.
What's your doctor said to that?
Well, it'd be taking a chance. That's the deal. Just taking a chance. And so the question that came to me was, with the number of fans, is who would it be? And I really had three people that I've enjoyed over the years: Savage, Flair, and then towards the end of my career in '94, I did a lot of work with Austin. So, and I like Steve. So those are my three choices of guys.
What were your thoughts? You know, you helped Austin a lot. I mean, he said that to many people early in his career, doing the tag teams and then later singles matches.
Right.
What was your reaction when Austin hit it so big in wrestling the last 2 years or so?
I was happy, and I tell that to everybody, even gym members at my club. I said, I wrestled Austin in my pretty much on a steady basis with Pillman and him were tag team, and then Austin in single matches. Pretty much, about the last year of my career with WCW. So. I knew what kind of money he was making. I knew what kind of, at that time, I don't keep in contact with Steve that much now, or for the last couple of years. But at that time, this guy was willing to work. This guy was willing to listen. This guy worked his butt off in the ring. This guy worked when he was hurt. I mean, he had bad knees then. I know he's got a bad neck now, but at that time he had bad knees then.
He's got bad everything.
He'd be blowed up as a son of a gun in the ring, but he would not stop. He would not stop. When it was time for a comeback, he'd be there for the feed. I grew to like him as much as admire him because he was the kind of guy that I was saying, well, he's kind of looking up to me, and he would come to me and he said, what about this, and ideas and philosophy and psychology of the business, and on and on and on. And I'm happy for Steve. Yeah.
Go ahead, Andy.
Well, slight change of subject. Ricky, if your son wanted to be a pro wrestler, would you encourage him? Would you let him? Would you say, no, I don't want you going into the business the way it is now?
Let me put it to you this way. I don't know if there would be very much encouragement. There's a lot of things that the fans, as they view on television, that they don't see what goes behind closed doors. The business is very, very political, even when I was in it, and maybe more so now. I'm not sure. I'm just sort of speculating. I wouldn't discourage him. No, I'd probably sit him down and just tell him, okay, this is the real life, what I'm going to tell you. And then if he chose to do it, I'd be there at his side and help him as much as he could.
Has he ever expressed interest in that?
I don't think in any way that I would want to be in the position just because I'm his father, just to put my foot down and just say downright no. But I would think at that time, if he made that decision, that he'd be a grown man, and then whatever decision he makes for his future, I would try to be there to support him.
Has he ever expressed interest in that before?
I'm sorry?
Has he ever expressed interest in doing that before?
Not really. I mean,
No?
believe it or not, my son doesn't even watch it. He doesn't. He's what he watches right now. We're involved with racing. He watches NASCAR racing and all sorts of racing, and that's what he watches. I mean, he looks at these drivers, as pretty much as well wrestling fans are looking at wrestlers, as idolizing them and as a fan. And boy, he could tell you the number of a car and the driver, you know, from Kyle Petty to Bobby Labonte and Dale Earnhardt and all those guys. You know, he could tell you their car number and the driver. So, you know, but it's a direction that he likes doing right now. He gives it a lot of effort, and I like the way he focuses on it and he goes for it. So, you know, the family's there to support him.
Given what Jeff Hardy does to himself, I think your son might be safer in a race car than in a wrestling ring these days.
Yeah.
Also, Rick, how come your two big title reigns, IC in '87 and Worlds and WCW in '89, were so short? You were super over at the time, and there were big wins.
Politics. Yeah. David, you know that.
Yeah, it was just it was out of his hands. It was just like this was the idea that the people making the decisions had at the time.
Yeah, but I mean, that big win over Savage in '87, then to lose it to Honky Tonk Man 2 months later. I mean, that was just justice personified right there.
Well, you know, I've had a couple of interviews like this, and I've told the story, and it just was an ego with Vince. And then the politics behind it, and it's just the way it goes, you know. When I was told I was going to get the belt from Savage at WrestleMania 3, I was told I was going to have it for about a year. Well, it just so happened that the year that I won the belt was also the same year that my son was born. And prior to winning the belt at WrestleMania, I just, out of respect, said, my son is going to come along around the beginning of July in 1987. I'd like to have a couple weeks off during that time, just so I could be there for his birth. And the office, including Vince at that time, said, well, I don't see any problem. You're just 2 weeks, okay. I won the belt, and then it was maybe about 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, at a TV. Vince came up to me and said that, okay, I'm going to be dropping the belt to Honky Tonk. And then I said, well, we had discussion about it. I said, I told you before I won it, Savage, that would like to have that time off. But then Vince's comment says, well, it's too long to have the Intercontinental belt dormant for a couple of weeks. And I said,
3 weeks?
I said, what are you talking about? I said, sometimes we don't go back to Chicago for a month later or something, or we go to Philly or, like that, the way they do bookings. We're traveling all around. I said, I don't understand this. And he said, well, no, I want you to drop it to Honky Tonk. And I said, well, okay, no problem. I'll drop it to Honky Tonk. And then after I dropped it to Honky Tonk, I said, after that and on TV, I said, well, I remember you asking for that time off to be with my wife. And so when my son came along, I said, instead of 2 weeks, I'm going to take 6 months off. So I took the rest of the year off. And Vince didn't like that either. I mean, it's just, it's kind of a way of a wrestler having the last word of it, And he looked at me, and I'm sure he thought that if he said, Ricky, I can't let you do that, at that time I probably would have given my notice. In a very diplomatic way. I'm not the kind of guy that goes and screams and hollers or gets pissed off or something like that. I try to do a lot of reasoning and logic. And so I just, very calmly said, remember when I asked for 2 weeks off? I think I'd like to have 6 months off. And he looked at me, knew that I was serious. And he said, well, okay. Well, when I came back, the example was made at the next WrestleMania, which was at, Jersey?
Yeah,
Atlantic City, yeah. And that was when they had the belt up, and they're having a tournament, right, David?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was the night that Savage won the belt, and I was eliminated by Valentine in the first round.
First round, right.
Right. And I was looking at the card, and I was looking at the brackets. They sort of had, like, brackets made up. And I said, okay, I get Valentine in the first round, and I said, okay, I'm just thinking to myself, I'll go over him. And then Savage, I knew Savage was going to win the belt. So Savage, I got him in the second round. I'll repay him the favor in a way that the way pros used to think about. Savage let me win the Intercontinental belt in WrestleMania 3. Okay, so I'm going to repay him the favor in round 2, and so that he can keep moving on, keep advancing, and win the belt. No problem. It really, really shocked me when I was told by Strongbow that I was going to lose in the first round of Valentine. I said, wow.
Yeah.
But that was just the way of Vince just getting back a little bit,
Yeah, especially coming off of the fact that you had made such, at that point in time, the match you had in Pontiac, and a lot of the matches you had, but that one had become, a pretty famous deal. So a rematch of that at WrestleMania, people would have, they would have popped pretty big for that one, especially on that show, because that wasn't the best show in the history of wrestling, that '88 WrestleMania.
No, I agree with you. No, it wasn't, and I'm sure that the fans would have just been really interested to see what the outcome of that match between Savage and I, for Atlantic City. But instead of thinking of what is best for the company and best for the business, a little bit of ego gets involved, and I got eliminated in the first round. So,
Okay, we've got to go to David in New York. David, what's happening?
Okay, hey, first question for Ricky. Did you ever have the urge to be a heel? Because did you ever have a run as a heel?
To answer the first part of your question is yes. And that was later towards the later part of my career. I thought, I knew that I was, for some reason, after wrestling for so many years, that it was coming to a close. I'm speaking from my heart. The last couple of years was a little bit of a struggle for me. And I'd always thought that before I get out of this damn business, I'm going to be able to work as a heel and for once walk over to the ropes and tell those people in the front row to shut up and sit down. Just do it once. Of course, the opportunity never came about. I talked to people in the business, and they thought I was crazy. They said, "Man, you've been a babyface for all those years, and Ricky Steamboat be a heel, they won't believe it." That's the answer I got. They said they just will not believe it. So, and that was at the time when the business was, let's make it believable.
Is Dave still on the phone, or are we going to go to Corey right now?
I'm still here.
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
Next question for Ricky is, I think it was last year at the Brian Pillman Memorial Show that you and Ric Flair hinted at doing a match at this year's show. Have you talked about doing that at all?
Did you say something about that? I'm having a hard time hearing you, but you said something about the Pillman show with Flair and I are having a match?
Remember you two were in the ring and you kind of did that little thing, that little tease?
Right.
Yeah, and I was just wondering if anyone's talked to you about, actually doing a match with Flair on that show next year.
No.
This year.
That night, we were getting a response, and a couple of guys were asking, are you guys working something here? Because none of the boys knew that it was going to happen. You know why? Because it was sporadic. We just took the moment. And we just took the moment and ran with it. That's all we did. And it's very typical of Flair and myself, like taking the moment in the match and running with it. And when we came back to the locker room, all the guys thought that it was something that was set up behind closed doors. And they were kind of curious about it. You guys going to be doing something? Hey, God, what a response we got from the crowd, on and on and on. But the answer is no. We just had a little fun with it.
Okay, we've got to go to Corey in Iowa. Corey, what's going on?
Hey, nothing much. How's it going, guys?
Hey.
Hey, I just had a quick question for Ricky. I wanted to know what your thoughts are on the internet today and on the so-called smart mark fans. I know that when you got into the business a long time ago, kayfabe was everything. What do you think about it today?
Once again, I understand that we got to move on. We're on the business has changed. Pretty much promotion has gone public on, especially WWF and Vince and everything else. The way our business is run, but kind of being brought up from the old school, but also understanding that this generation of fans that we have, are that have been introduced to what the business is really all about. Okay, my feeling on it is when people ask me out on the road about this, and this in the business, or whatever it may be, or whatever the question may be, I can't give them an answer like, oh, man, it was real and everything else and all that kind of stuff, because they give me a look back like they know that I'm lying. They actually know. So I can't help the way that the exposures went. I have no control over that. So actually just instead of trying to cover up and play hard-nosed with it, any questions they ask me about the business, it was done this way and it was done that way, and what you heard was true, and this and this and this and that. And the business has turned more into that entertainment layout anyway. So with me trying to stay hardcore and say, no, it's all BS, and thinking back the way the direction of the business is going. So and I'm a pretty understanding guy to where, years ago I would stick to my guns, but you got to understand that most of the people that have come up to me and talk about wrestling and what they're seeing today, it's just the way the business has turned in another direction, and you can't deny it. That's the bottom line. You cannot deny it. So, at times it rubs me wrong a little bit, but maybe that's the old school Steamboat. But then, taking consideration, you got to understand the way things are going in today's world. So hey, we got to move on, and we got to just make adjustments. So, bottom line, I guess I'm pretty cool with it at times. Yeah.
Do you think you're different from a lot of other old school guys that might be so cool with it?
Well, I would have to say yes, because I do know some old school guys that would tell a fan is that when we did wrestling back in yesteryear, it was on the up and up. They're just taking it to a new level of business with entertainment because money talks, ratings talks, and on and on and on. But, and I've been with autograph sessions and stuff like that, and I just sort of look at the guy, and when the fan leaves, he looks over at me, and I look over at him, and I say, well, that's the way you want to do it, okay. But I think these people today are much smarter. There's too many answers out there that you have easy access to getting to. I know if you tell today's fan that business is on the up and up, they walk away talking to themselves that guy's full of bullshit. So
yeah.
It's it went from being not all that many years ago, but say even 10 years ago, almost, or certainly 15, a secret society to like an open book is what it is now.
Right.
Pretty much. Everyone knows everything. It seems like not everything, but a lot.
Well, David, as much as you're involved with it, and the comments that I get, I said, well, okay, we understand that this is set up, and the outcome of the match everybody knows, but they finished their line with that. Boy, you guys sure do take a lot of abuse.
I think people understand that now more than ever before.
Right? Yeah. Don't you hear that a lot, David?
I think that the thing is now is that like so often when guys aren't on TV, invariably 90% of the time that they're not is because of an injury, and people see, like Steve Austin, who's like the most publicized guy, and he, his knee went out, his neck is hurt, and I think people if you just watch it with open eyes, knowing that guys can get hurt, and then you see what they do and watch it close, it's almost amazing to you that they're not hurt worse more often, and there's, I think that. That type of thing is, it is, a lot of the critics of wrestling before, from 15 years ago would like laugh and just go, these guys know how to land, no one ever gets hurt. And I don't think people say that one anymore.
There's more respect for it now.
Right. And I also think, a little bit of what people are seeing with ECW, right, David?
Yeah.
All right, they're seeing that, and there's a lot of physical abuse in that. And then they hear or read about it in their local area that the backyard wrestling, right, David?
Sure.
A guy's coming off the roof of his house, right?
But to me, that's a little silly.
I know that's a little silly, but but the general public, they're reading about it in their local newspaper. So and so is wrestling in his backyard. He jumps off the roof of his house and does a big splash on the guy and drops a knee on him and breaks the guy's ribs and people getting hurt and all that, all. So in the back of their mind, they say, okay, well, these guys are, they're doing the ring, and then I hear about so-and-so is just getting hurt, and he's getting knee surgery. One guy's got hurt his neck. He's out for good. So maybe, in the back of their mind, they sit back and they start thinking about this, and they put two to two together and say, this business is really physical. Even though that they might know who the outcome is, but God, these guys are really taking a lot of abuse out there.
Yeah, to put on a really entertaining performance. We've got a phone call from Athens, Greece. It's Dustin. Dustin, how you doing?
All right. My question's for Dave. Have you heard anything about them doing another Legends show like they did a couple of months back on pay-per-view?
Like Heroes of Wrestling?
Yeah.
Probably not. The first one was not successful at all.
No.
On every level, I guess.
Did we ever get a buy rate for that show?
Yeah.
It was like, I think it was less than a 0.1.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
David, what about what they had last night?
With Steele and Snuka and everything?
Yeah.
Yeah, they just brought in George Steele, Tito Santana, and Jimmy Snuka to wrestle Jeff Jarrett, and they thought that it would help with the ratings. It really didn't help with the ratings at all. Snuka got a nice pop. Snuka came off the top of a cage with a splash like he did with Don Morocco, 17, 18 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't see the show, but I got a lot of my gym members today talking about it.
Yeah, it was pretty. It was actually Monday night, but it was. It's pretty amazing at Snuka's age to be doing something like that. When he went up there, it was just like, oh my God. I mean, I remember when he was, like I said, 82. He did that a couple of times, but it's like it's not 82 anymore, and he hasn't even been wrestling full time on a major level. And he went off the top of the cage, and then Benoit went off the top of the cage on Jarrett.
How old is Snuka now?
Would guess 56. I'm sure it's within a year, one way or the other on that one.
Yeah, I just remembered the Heroes of Wrestling. All he did was a cross body off the top, so I thought, this poor guy's knees must be shot. And then he goes into the cage and does a splash, and I thought, wow.
Yeah, because he didn't even do the splash on that pay-per-view. That's right. He did a crossbody.
Yeah.
Bob Orton.
David, how old is Snuka?
I think 56-ish.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
I think he might even be older than that.
You might
I was
be
talking
right.
to someone yesterday who they said he was 56 like 4 years ago. They were hanging out with him.
Could be. I just remember when there was a time in '83, actually, so it's funny they were talking about that arrest in '83.
Yeah.
He was 39 then, so that was that's 16 years. Make him 55 maybe. I don't know, something like that.
A gym member today at my club asked me how old was Snuka, and I said mid-50s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, didn't you do a bodybuilding contest with him, or maybe even more than one at one point?
We did one.
Yeah.
We competed against each other one time. Yeah. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Have you heard anything about Smash's condition either? From the Demolition. Yeah, I talked to Axe back in September, and he said Smash broke his back in Japan.
Barry Darso? Now, yeah. Barry Darso's wrestling for WXO, I think.
Axe told me he said he was over in Japan, and they got powerbombed outside the ring and got hurt real bad, and he's in the hospital in New York.
No. He's
crazy.
He's wrestling he's wrestling for the WXO group. He was working with Barry Darso in WCW until they let him go.
Oh. Have you heard anything about Flair coming back? He hadn't been on Nitro in a while.
Flair, they talked on Friday about bringing Flair back, and the two sides still didn't come to an agreement. Flair wants to come back as a heel. They want him as a baby face. He didn't want to come in and get squashed by Nash, which was, even though that's not what they say they want, when you look at the booking, that is what they want. So it's kind of, I don't think he wants to come back and be putting Nash over every time now. There's a lot of, I think Flair is and rightfully so, is unhappy about the fact that he probably means more in ratings than just about anyone in the company. And, he's had a longer career and all that with the company than anyone. And he's making, and he willingly works house shows, which most of the top guys don't do. And at the same time, he's making like half of what these other guys are making that, are not even as big ratings draws or house show draws as he is. So there's a frustration there right now.
Or even showing up as many house shows as he is.
Well, he's willing to go. I mean, these other guys, don't want to go, and then when they do go, they start coming up with injuries like 2 days before they're supposed to go on the road.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Here's Flair. Maybe 15 years older, okay, than these guys. Making half the money. Working twice as many shows. That's what I meant. You know, showing up at the house shows when these guys are doing no shows.
Right.
Right. And so, getting paid half the money and on and on and on. You know, just the way that part of the business sort of befuddles me in the way it's turned. You know, these guys have still been able to get. You know, David, years ago, if it was a situation to where I wasn't going to show up at these house shows because either I got a stomach ache or something, or my knee hurts, you know, my pay, you would get paid.
Yeah.
You know, that's the bottom line. And if it kept up, you'd be having a loser leave town match with a U-Haul stuck on the back of your car.
Yeah, and they would actually enforce the stipulation. Now they do loser leave towns and then they wrestle the next day.
Right.
On TV.
And even if you get like a $500 bonus now, if you're making $1.5 million, you can go without that $500.
Yeah, that's the other thing is that the contracts are so big, and these guys now think that they're, you know, and in a sense they are, that they're television stars and that it's beneath them to actually do house shows. That's one of the things that's really hurt the WCW house show business, because that mentality is not there in the WWF. Well, you know, everyone who's physically able is on the road.
Well, that's what I heard is, you know, the difference between they advertise who's going to be at the house show, then actually the guys that do show up, and the number of substitution that keeps going on and on and on has hurt the company.
Well, even when you were there, they had that problem, and it's never changed.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd have to say about Vince is that he doesn't tolerate or put up with that. You know.
Yeah, Rick. Before we're just about out of time, but I wanted to ask you one real quick thing for some of the listeners who don't know. Could you pretty much describe like the injury? You know, your last match actually was with Steve Austin a couple of years back, and
right.
And you suffered a back injury, and,
right.
and that pretty much finished your wrestling career. And
right.
and how are you physically as far as like the back right now? I mean, is it better than it was then, or does it still give you trouble?
No, it gives me trouble every day. I went through 10 to 12 weeks of therapy at the Charlotte Spine Center. I have to do a number of different stretches. I do continue to work out, but it's very, very light as compared to when, the way I used to work out years ago with squatting and benching and deadlifting and all that kind of stuff. I've got 2 real bad discs. I've got one disc that a piece of disc matter has broken off, leaving that. It's almost like an inner tube in a tire, and it's bubbled out. Okay, so that area is really weak. I had what I did. I suffered a spinal compression in which my vertebrae is compressed, and I do have periodic pain down both legs. I even have a thing that's called floppy foot, to where my one leg will go completely dead all the way down to my foot. So it just flops, and so I just got to be careful. My heart would like to have those matches with the Flair or the Savage or the Austins, but my head is telling me physically, I could have a real bad bump in the ring, and it could really create a problem in which would affect me for the rest of my life and what I'm able to do with my son. Even something as simple as going out there and throwing the football or baseball with him, things will change. I've been to 4 different specialists, been to Duke University. I've had a CAT scan and MRIs done to my back. I kept going for different doctors and getting different opinions and hoping I'd get the one guy that would tell me, he says, well, I think you'll be all right to go back. But on 4 different occasions, 4 different specialists, and not one of them calling up the other doctor and saying, well, what do you think? They never converse with each other. I got the same answer. They all kept telling me, you have one bad bump on your back. We're going to put these 2 screws in your back that are about 3 inches long, and your life is going to change for the rest of your life. So, after 4 different, I just, man, what the hell's going on here?
Did you ever settle the law? Do you have a lawsuit outstanding with WCW at one point? Not all that long ago. Is that still going, or is that pretty much done?
Say again.
You had a lawsuit with WCW, I think, a couple of years ago?
Right.
Is that still going, or has that been settled?
We never settled, and it's not going on.
Okay.
They just played hard-nosed with me. I think I had about 2 months left of my contract, maybe 3, about 12 weeks. I felt that after working with the company, and as hard as we did, they just cut me off for the last 12 weeks of my pay. And I said, and we weren't talking a whole lot of money, not by today's standards. And I just thought it was a rook. I got hurt working for you guys. I said, finish paying out my contract for about the next 12 weeks. There's guys now that don't even work and they're still getting their big money. I don't know.
Oh God, you wouldn't even believe it now.
David, before we close, how much time we got?
We're actually totally done. We got to get out. So anything real last you want to say right at the end?
Maybe. All right, just some food for thought, and you and I could do this again.
Okay, I'd love to.
All right. Can you imagine? I mean, everybody asked me, Ric Flair back in his day, and all that kind of stuff. Randy Savage, myself, Jake the Snake Roberts, and all that guy. How about if we took the cast of characters, all those guys in their early years, the way they brought the business? What kind of reaction would they get in today's wrestling with the way they're promoting it? But look at a rookie Flair. Look at a rookie Savage. Look at a rookie Don Morocco, or look at Jake the Snake, and all those guys. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Do you mean in their prime or?
After they.
Everyone, if they, it's all the political game. If you were allowed to shine, you would. I don't think there's any question. It's a question of being allowed.
I'm looking at a Flair of 1976.
Yeah. Rick, we were totally out of time right now.
Okay.
I've got to get running. Okay.
Right.
And don't forget, everybody, we'll be back here at 6:00 tomorrow. I want to thank Ricky Steamboat. I want to thank Brian, and don't forget Brian's on Yahoo tonight in an hour.